Today, we are going to be taking a look at some ADP, and we're going to be using some fancy football calculators, PPR ADP, which is for the last 3 days. And I have to say, some of the things when I was looking at it really caught me off guard. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be kind of buying or selling before we would take a player at their current ADP, and we'll discuss through some of that. So again, as always, before we get started, if you're watching this on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. Really appreciate it. We got a lot of stuff coming out. You can also check out some of the other stuff that we've done, like Cody. He actually just recently released a top 10 rookie running backs for Dynasty, which you can also extrapolate that over to redraft as well. And if there's any other topics you'd like us to cover, keeper, Dynasty, redraft, roster construction, strategy base, let us know. You can also join our Slack chat, which was actually popping today in the Dynasty chat. A lot of good stuff going on in there. And, if you're listening to this on podcast, please consider rating and reviewing the show. It really helps us out. So with all that being said, before we actually get started, we do have one important news and notes that came out, of course, because holdout season is finally here. Dalvin Cook is planning on holding out until he gets a reasonable contract. What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm never going to fault a player for trying to get as much money as they can, like especially at the running back position where it looks like those second contracts. I think we've talked about it before on the show too, where going forward, they're just going to be discarded to the side, right? They're just going to be crushed during their first contract, and then the second contract is going to come up, and they're not going to get that money. So I will never fault a player for trying to get as much money as they can while they're playing. But from what I've been reading and what I've been seeing, it seems like he's not going to be able to accrue this season to head into free agency after this if he doesn't show up. And it also seemed like the Vikings don't have a lot of cap space to give him the money that he's looking for. Like I think he wanted – it was north of what McCaffrey got, which was like 16 per year. Obviously, he's not going to get that, but if he wants anything close to it, I don't think the Vikings even have the cap space to be able to do that. So I don't know, man. And we saw how that worked with Melvin last year. Did not really turn out too well in his favor. I don't think he got the money that he was hoping to get. So I will never fault the player for doing it, but it kind of seems like he's not going to have too much leverage in this particular situation.
Yeah, he has like zero leverage, right? Because essentially, if he holds out the entire year, he does not become a free agent, but he becomes a restricted free agent next year. So, there is that. Like, he's not necessarily he's not a complete. It's not like the year doesn't count like it used to. But now in the new CBA, before you would start to get fined if you did not show up like you were supposed to. But most time, I would say about 99% of the times, teams always escaped, never actually went through with it, didn't actually find them. New CBA, that's gone. They have no, that's not an option anymore for them not to hold it back on you, right? So if he were to sit out the entire year, I think it ended up being like he would end up losing like over 1.5 million, something like that, which is more than what he's going to make this year. So he essentially would be paying the league to actually not play, and then he would also be a restricted free agent. Which now at that point, teams could bid for his services, and then he could end up getting his contract. So maybe it is somewhat of a possibility if he's okay with losing that kind of money. But he doesn't have a ton of leverage here at all. And I get it. There's people that have said, well, he is the team. They've built this entire offense kind of around being a run first offense. But for me, I'm not saying Alexander Mattison is as good as Dalvin Cook, but I don't think it's a significant fall off between the two of them if he does not play, and Alexander Mattison and Mike Boone fill that role. So I don't think it's a great move for Dalvin Cook. And, he may not be the only one though, right? Like we started talking about kind of Joe Mixon, because Joe Mixon's in the same situation as he is. Alvin Kamara's in the same situation that he is. So, I mean, this may be the tip of the iceberg here. I know we're only in June, but what does this do for Dalvin Cook's fan? I mean, because, we saw it last year, right, with Melvin Gordon, whenever he was going to sit out and he fell dramatically in drafts. And I think that if this continues to roll through until we get into August, like this is going to really significantly hurt his ADP, along with some of these other guys. What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, man. I mean, if this is continuing into August and we're still hearing that they're super far apart, he has no plans of showing up, I think people are going to start to get worried like they did. Because didn't someone by the name of Kevin Steele take Melvin Gordon early in the Scott Fish Bowl last year?
There was a guy with that name, and he did. He actually also took Todd Gurley because, I tried to be contrarian. He fell a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and take Todd Gurley, and I took the L on that as well.
Yeah, so I think what's going to end up happening is, with that recency bias in mind, people are going to hold off on them. I think we see Madison's redraft ADP really skyrocket. I think as of right now, he's going as like RB40, RB44, something like that. So he's going to jump way up. I think right now, if for whatever reason, if you're redrafting super early, I'm not going to let him drop too far. You know what I mean? Like I can't do that right now because of all the things. Like it seems like he doesn't have that leverage, right? So I'm not going to let him drop too far if you have like an early draft for whatever reason. But if you do yours late, like the, fourth week of the preseason or something, and you're still not hearing anything, then yeah, he's definitely going to drop probably two rounds. I would assume maybe into the third.
Probably more than that, because I think at that point he probably does pull a Melvin Gordon, and he's already pot committed at that point. And I think you could see him hold out at least all the way through until until he has to report. I think it's like week 8 or week 9, just like Melvin Gordon did last year, and then show up. Which, if that happened, I mean, he should be going in like the 8th or 9th round at that point, because you're only get him for the half of the season.
Right.
So it's going to be an interesting time to monitor this, because I do think there's a possibility Joe Mixon. Now, Joe Mixon hasn't had the career success that Dalvin Cook has, but the thing with Dalvin Cook as well, he's never stayed healthy. He's never played 16 games in his entire career. So I think it's like last year was definitely like he showed us exactly what we thought he could be. But at the same time, I do think that it should be taken into consideration the fact that he's just never been healthy, even in college. So, those things certainly hurt him. But like I said, at the end of the day, we still have a long time to go, and we'll have to monitor how this thing goes, because this could all be water under the bridge. Maybe they get a deal done. We'll see. But as of right now, I think you have to drop him down in your rankings. And in best ball, you're in a best ball situation right now. I don't know if I'd feel comfortable taking him. Now, if he starts to fall to a significant level, something we saw with like Zeke a couple of years ago whenever he did this, and then where people really hit kind of a home run because he fell and people didn't know how long he was going to hold out. And I think he missed. Did he miss a week? I think he missed a week, right? Because he signed like right before the season started, or right there at that point. But his draft value had fallen, and then people were actually ready to get him at a little bit of a value. And I think that could end up happening here at Dalvin Cook, just depending on how things go. He seems pretty serious about it. We'll see what happens.
At what point, if say you're in one of those late drafts, how early would you take Madison in this scenario? Like, what I mean? It's a week or two out. They still seem super far apart. At what point are you going to pull the trigger on Madison?
If we get to close to the end of August and we have no sign of him showing up, then I think you probably consider taking Madison in the 5th or 6th round, something in that range, right? You still understand that he's only going to have half a season of at best, probably a half season of value. However, that half season, those 8 weeks can end up carrying you, at least into the playoffs at that point if he ends up returning the value, as well as I still think he has somewhat of a role, even in the event that that when he comes back. Like, I think he is somebody that has some standalone value, because I do think he's somebody that's probably going to see touches every single week as well.
Even, the injury history with Dalvin as well. So that makes sense to me.
So, anyways, all right. So, go ahead and get this thing started here with the old, do some ADP pressure. Again, you can check this out over at Fantasy Football Calculator using their ADP, their PPR ADP. Their half-point PPR has not been updated. So, but their PPR has been updated. So, that's what we're using. So, let's go ahead and start. We're going to start at the running back position here. And we're going to start with my boy, who we just talked about last week as somebody that I felt as a breakout candidate. But I'm not going to lie to you. I did not see this kind of ADP for Kenyon Drake. I thought he was going to be somebody that we could get in like the mid-second, maybe early, late second, maybe early third. But right now, he's going at 109 right now. Are you buying or selling that?
In the words of Randy Jackson, that's a no from me, dog. I can't do that. RB5. I'm sorry, man. Like, because dude, there's a lot of smart people that are smarter than me. Silva and guys like that who are all about Kenyon Drake this year, and I'm sure that's why he's sitting at RB5 at this point. But dude, I can't do it. Like, this is not a guy that a lot of people were super excited about going in this. Now all of a sudden he had, I think it was like 3 good games with Arizona. Now all of a sudden we're all in and we're all buying it. Like, I get going from the death trap of Miami with Adam Gase to this offense are completely different. You can't really compare the two. But if you look at what he did, like he had some like the games where he played really well, they were really good. So he had 3 games with over 100 yards rushing. I think they were all over like 120. I think he had like 160 in there at one point. But then he had 5 games where he didn't even eclipse 70 rushing yards. He wasn't utilizing the passing, or let me say that he was not too efficient with what he was getting. He had like 2 games of 7 targets, but those didn't amount to anything. He only had 1 game with more than 30 receiving yards. So at this, like RB5 at 109, I can't do that. I know that you're all about him. You went to Slack earlier. We threw a poll up in there. Who you wanted. There was Mixon, Sanders, Drake, Jacobs. Was there one more in there? I think maybe.
Derrick Henry.
Okay. So, Kev, you put that in there. Zach Marmer, a former TFA OG, threw his vote down on Drake. Both of you guys said you loved him, but are you buying at this point?
I think he's his show notes actually a little bit. He's actually going on RB7, so it's not as crazy, but still. So right now he's basically essentially going, McCaffrey, Barkley, Kamara, Dalvin Cook, which is probably going to change a little bit with the news we just got. Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs are all going ahead of him. Going after him is Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb. And Ezekiel Elliott's going ahead of him as well. And then Miles Sanders, right? And so you look at that and you say, okay, well, who would you take? When I get to that point, if I'm wanting to go running back at that point, I would consider Josh. I definitely have a consideration for Joe Mixon, and then I would take Miles Sanders ahead of him. Which I would. I would take Miles Sanders over Kenyon Drake. But it's hard to deny Kenyon Drake in the situation he's going to be in there. There's nobody else around him, right? I mean, it's Chase Edmonds and Eno Benjamin, and I mean, when he arrived there, he finished RB4 from week 9 on. He's in a better offense. Another Kyler Murray, I think, takes a step forward this year. Opens up we like running, especially with running quarterbacks because it lanes for the running backs. I think he's going to see targets, and I think Andrew Hopkins helps as well, and just kind of makes this offense go. So with everything considered and how good this offense probably should be, we know it's going to be a high pass offense. He should have opportunities to score. It's going to be hard for him to really fail. And so if you look at the running backs going around him, it's tough to really make an argument against them because of everything that I just said. And then, again, you go look at the running back after him, Joe Mixon. I don't know what that offense is going to be. Does Joe Mixon struggle? Joe Mixon has not. I mean, he hasn't officially broken out. I definitely think I love Joe Mixon as well. And then you have, I mentioned Nick Chubb, who's going after him. And then Miles Sanders, who has some question marks in his own right. They keep talking about bringing another running back. But again, we've talked about that. Doesn't really matter to me. But I would take Miles Sanders ahead of him. But that's kind of the list for me in terms of running backs. And so for me, he has a really clear-cut role here in this offense. And it could end up commanding 70, 80% of opportunity share.
I don't know, dude. There's just something about it that I just can't buy in at that price. Like I can't just go from him being an afterthought to RB5 within the span of 30 seconds. I don't know, man. That's one I would rather have Devontae. Obviously, we're talking running backs right now, but going after him, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, give me all of those guys over Kenyon Drake easily. Like I said, man, there's just something about it. Maybe I need to pull up the old NFL Game Pass and watch him. Maybe I'll get a little bit more appreciation for it. But as of right now, RB5 at 109, I can't.
It is. It's pretty spicy. Like I said, it was real spicy when I saw it. Maybe it drops a little bit. We are in June. That gets talked down a little bit. Some other guys move up ahead of him, and he ends up going in that mid-second round. Because I would feel great about taking him in mid-second. Taking him at 109 is really spicy there. The other thing I will say as we're on the running backs are flying off the board.
It's crazy.
Like wide receivers is being significantly pushed down. Like when you talk about like Allen Robinson, for example, as a wide receiver I love, you can get him in like mid to late third round. Like he's almost going into the fourth round. Allen Robinson is. And he might, but regardless, he's going in the third round. Which, see, to me, like I thought he was going like the second round. A lot of these guys are just being pushed down because running backs are being drafted so heavily. I think there's some edge. Now, I do not believe going 0 RB. Like, I think 0 RB is pretty much done. I think it's kind of a dead thing. But I do think that you can go robust wide receiver and take a running back in the first couple of rounds and just slam wide receiver because value is so crazy that you could end up taking, I don't know, Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill with your first 2 picks and then coming back around in the third round and still getting like a Leonard Fournette, who we'll talk about, or David Johnson, grabbing a couple of these other guys and loading up with some other places, but continuing to slam wide receiver because wide receivers are just being undervalued right now. I think a little bit too much. I think we've gotten a little bit too overboard, and this might be a nice time to pivot.
Yeah, man, I agree. Well, I'm sure we'll definitely get more into the strategy stuff once we get closer to the season. The next guy we have up here on the list, a guy that's near and dear to your heart. I want to get your thoughts on this. Clyde Edwards-Helaire going at 209 as RB14. Kev, what are you doing with him at that point? Are you buying or selling?
This is a tough one, really, to be honest with you, at where he's currently going, 208. I think he ends up going higher than that by the time the season gets here. I think he continues to get talked up. He's going at about RB14, and I think we could end up seeing him going as an RB1, like a late back-end RB1. I have reservations with this because we look at this team last year, and I get that Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a talent is better than anything they had last year with LaShawn McCoy and Damian Williams. Like, far and away, he's a much better talent. However, I don't know if the opportunity is going to be there. And that is the issue that I have with him and him going that high. Like, it's so tough because I can see a scenario where he's not getting that. Like, Damian Williams is still going to have a role. I want people to understand that. Like, he's still going. It's not going to be a ton, but if you go back and you just look at the opportunity share for this team last year, so basically last year that there was 89 total receptions for the running backs. 106 targets, 311 total rushing attempts, 89 receptions, 106 total targets. Damian Williams averaged 10 carries per game and 3.2 targets per game. LaShawn McCoy averaged 7 carries per game and 2.4 targets per game, right? None of the other running backs really come into the fold here because none of them, Damian Williams, Darrell Williams, Darwin Thompson, never really had much of a role. So that's out the window, right? So if you look at that, do you think that the Chiefs are going to start throwing the ball less? And now you could go back to when Kareem Hunt was there, and I understand that argument as well. And you look at how even Kareem Hunt's rookie year, or not Kareem Hunt, Patrick Mahomes' rookie year, where first year he played, Kareem Hunt was really productive, right? However, they didn't have the weapons that they have now. Yeah, Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce was there, right? They have Sammy Watkins, who's still there, which he was there as well, I believe, too. But they have Watkins, McCole Hardman's there. Like, they have all these weapons. Not everybody's going to be able to touch the ball a ton, right? And I think they threw the ball. They were number one in passing compared to the run-pass ratio last year. They were number one in that. Unless you're expecting that to go down and they're going to start running the ball more, I don't think the attempts are going to be there. And like I've said, like there's so many options in the passing game. Like, I don't think that he's not going to get. And I love Ray Garvin to death. Dude is a beast. Follow him on Twitter. Check out his Destination Devy. But he's someone that has mentioned that he thought he could have 100 receptions or 100 targets, or it was either 100 targets, 100 receptions. Regardless, I don't think he gets anywhere close to that. I don't see how they're going to get anywhere close to that unless they suffer significant injury, which is possible. But if that doesn't happen, I don't see how that comes to light. And if that doesn't come to light, unless he is super efficient and he gets a ton of touchdowns, which is possible with this offense. I love this offense. You know that it's one of the best, if not the best, still in the league. They bring it. And here's something else to remember too. When we talk about, which we'll talk about Cam Akers lately, but there's a bit of a narrative here, right? With Cam Akers, it's how bad that offensive line is, and that's why he's not going to be able to produce, right? If you go back to 2018 Rams, that offense is one of the best in the league. Now, last year it took a step backward. But when we look at that offensive line last year, it was terrible. But nobody talks about the Chiefs' offensive line. The Chiefs' offensive line was just as bad as the Rams was last year. If you look at their offensive line last year, they ranked 28th in adjusted line yards and 21st in power. Those are things that should be taken into consideration. Their offensive line is not good by any means. Patrick Mahomes is a madman, and runs out and does all this and makes plays happen, right? But their offensive line's not better. They did nothing to improve their offensive line. They did have some injuries last year, which should be taken into consideration as well. So for me, I'm a sell that. Unless we get more as the season gets closer, and we find out that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be the workhorse and everything in this offense, I could probably get on board with that. But right now, I can't do it. I mean, and we haven't heard anything different either. That the fact that David Williams is going to be the starter.
Yeah, man. Totally agree. I was interested to get your take on it, obviously, because you're a Kansas City faithful. But at that point, I completely agree. I don't think he just pushes Damian Williams out of the picture. I think that's going to be a little bit more of a split than what people want to think. And at RB14, it's like a price where you're kind of taking it into consideration, but like you're not taking it too seriously. Obviously, if we get word that it's going to be the Clyde show and it's just going to be him, then this ADP is just going to rise, right? But as of right now, like I said, it's like, well, Damian's there, but is he really? I don't know. But so for me, I don't have too much more else to add. I think you hit on all the important points, and I'm also going to pass on that. Like I said, until we get more information, 209 RB14, that's just a little rich for me. There's a guy who's going after him who more or less should have the entire backfield to himself. I think his target's going to come down a little bit, obviously compared to last year. But Leonard Fournette, RB16 going at 301. That is going to be a situation where I'm going to buy that. For dynasty purposes, I kind of want to get out this year. I would rather get out a year too early than a year too late. So unless you're a contender, I would be selling Fournette if you can. But for redraft purposes for 2020, I'm going to be you're not going to get too many other running backs after this point that are going to have the carry upside that he does. Like I already mentioned, he's not going to get 100 targets, but everyone keeps talking about, they brought in Chris Thompson. Gruden worked with him at Washington. Can we just put that to the side as if like Chris Thompson is like a beacon of health and he's going to come in there and just be ready to go for all 16 games. I think Fournette's targets were going to come down no matter what, but I don't look at Chris Thompson as being like the reason why. If he can stay healthy, I think he can be a nice PPR upside pick like much later in your draft. But I'm not looking at Chris Thompson as like some huge threat to Leonard Fournette. Even if he splits some of the carries, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. If his targets come back down to like that 50 range, I think is fine. I think his rookie season, I think he had around like 35 catches, something like that, and I think he finished as an RB1. If not, it was right on the fringe. So I think that's well within his range of outcomes again for this year. So RB16, I think you're getting a little bit of value. But what are you thinking on Fournette, Kev?
I don't really understand it, to be honest with you, his ADP. For somebody that, commanded 90% of the opportunity share last year. He was 9th in fantasy points per game, 6th in rushing yards, 5th in receptions, the 3 total touchdowns, despite the fact that, which should be mentioned, he only had 3 total touchdowns last year, but he still finished 9th in fantasy points per game, 4th in red zone touches, 4th in targets. And they weren't even a team that ran the ball a ton. They were 23rd in attempts per game, but he was 8th in yards created. There's lots of like here with him, right? I know people are all of a sudden looking at Chris Thompson, and all of a sudden it's like Chris Thompson is like Tariq Cohen or some. He continues to get hurt. Over the last 2 years, if you look at it, he's had a couple here and there games that you can kind of get excited about. I get it. If you look at Chris Thompson, he does have familiarity with the offense with Jay Gruden there. Last year, he had 58 targets and then 42 receptions, which was 16th in the league. He was hurt. He missed some opportunities there. And then if you go back to 2018, I think the first 2 weeks of the year, he scored 20 fantasy points, and then it sort of fell off, right? I do think Chris Thompson is going to be involved. I think Chris Thompson is going to receive pass catching work, but that's kind of baked in there for you at RB16, right? they're going to feed him the ball. There's nobody else there. There's Raquel Armstead, as a late round or a handcuff that I like later in drafts. But there's lots of like here with Leonard Fournette, and getting him at RB16 in the third round. Like I said, if you're one of those people who starts wide receiver early, I mean, if you could get, like I said, Devontae Adams and like Tyreek Hill with your first 2 picks, and then going like Leonard Fournette in the third round, like I would feel pretty solid about that, right? And I think all the opportunities are going to be there. I still think he commands that backfield. I still think that he is somewhere in the range. He's not getting 100 targets. I don't see that happening. I think he probably falls more into the 60, 70 target range. Probably gets around 40, 40 receptions, something like that, which will hurt him a little bit for sure. But overall, like Leonard Fournette should be ranked or should be going higher than he is. And if he continues to go around this range, like I'll have no problem, slamming the draft button, in drafts here in a couple of months.
Yeah, like I said, especially with the guys who are going after them, you're not going to find too many that are going to have the touch upside that Fournette has. So he's someone, if he stays in that range, because it seems like everyone's just thinking he's going to have like this massive drop off, which actually leads pretty nicely to our next guy, which is another one that I'm not fully understanding here either. But Chris Carson at RB21 going around later at 401. Kev, why don't you take this one first? Are you buying or selling at that price for Chris Carson?
This is a tough one for me, but I think I'm buying at RB21, right? You're kind of baking out all of that. Rashad Penny's still there. They drafted DJ Dallas. Now, we're going to have to wait and see because there's been some rumors that Marshawn Lynch might actually come back. If that happens, that will change how I feel about Carson, because I think that I think Carson could move into more of a pass-catching role than he is an every down back. But if you look at it in 15 games last year, he committed 71% of the opportunities, 15.5 fantasy points per game. They were obviously, a run-heavy offense. They ran the third most. They ran the third most in the league. He ended up with 278 carries, 46 targets, 43 red zone touches, which was 13th. And then he was 4th in yards created. He was also 4.7 breakaway run rate, which was good. He also was 3rd in the league with 6 100-yard games, which was tied with Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, Aaron Jones, and Josh Jacobs. And then he was his 3.6 yards after contact were also 15th in the league. So there's lots of like with Chris Carson last year, right? Chris Carson's always been undervalued. It happens every year. We look at Chris Carson, and it was when Rashad Penny was going to get picked. Everybody hated Chris Carson. Chris Carson was dead. And, well, as we found out, that really I don't know what the hell the Seahawks were doing with ever drafting him in the first round. That turned out to not, work out because Rashad Penny has been nothing, right? We saw a little glimpse of him last year. We got a little excited with him. We thought maybe there was an opportunity there with him, and then that ended up falling off. So for me, barring anything crazy happening, like I said, like Marshawn Lynch being brought back, I think it's an obvious buy at RB21. I don't get it. Like, he was 12th in fantasy points per game last year, right? Like, I don't know what there's not to like in a run heavy offense. He's likely going to command a similar workload. He's going to get targets. So there's a lot to like here. And at RB21, he's almost going as an RB3. So I'm all about it.
Yeah, man. To me, I think it's still going to be his backfield. I think there is a little bit of a hesitation as far as like if he starts.
I was gonna say, it just hit me. They also signed, I saw I mentioned that Carlos Hyde was also signed as well. So I think that should be mentioned as well.
Yeah. And to me, that's more of a, if Chris Carson's fumbling issues continue, there's someone there to nip at his heels, right? Like, I don't necessarily see Hyde pushing him for the starting job at the outset of the season, unless, like you said, something crazy happens. Let's say like Chris Carson is just like looks like shit for whatever reason, or his fumbling issues pop up. That is a situation where I can see somebody like Carlos Hyde coming in and taking some of those touches and kind of taking over that role. But I think at the outset, and at that price, with everybody chasing running backs like we've talked about, I think you can buy there without that like really throwing off your draft, right? If you take, I wouldn't want to take Chris Carson as my RB1 by any means, but if he's your RB2 and then that doesn't work out and you can snag someone later in your draft, like I'd be fine with that. Not as my RB1, but as my RB2, and I think you can make up for that later in the draft.
You feel like almost that they're going to have to move on from somebody here because like it feels like they have weights. I mean, right now they have Carson, they have Penny, they have Carlos Hyde, they drafted DJ Dallas. Like it feels like there's a lot of mouths here, and like I can't imagine they're going to keep all of these running backs.
Yeah, somebody's definitely going to get cut or something, right? Like I can't with all the guys you mentioned, I can't imagine there's going to be too much of a trade market for them, especially with Penny not being able to stay healthy. Hyde has been bouncing around the league for how long now? Dallas, they obviously just signed, so unless one of those guys like really shows out in the preseason or something, and they can move on for them, that's the only scenario I see. But I mean, it wouldn't surprise me to see if somebody like Travis Homer is cut. You know what I mean? A couple of those other guys, but that's kind of where I'm sitting right now with that situation.
Yeah. So all right. So let's go ahead and move on. Let's jump over to Cam Akers, right? Our first, our second rookie, I should say. He's currently going at 5'8", RB27. Are you buying or selling him?
I'm going to live my best hedge life right now, and I'm going to
go or.
Hey, will you go out with me? Yes or no? I'm going to circle or and send it back. I'm going to buy at RB27, but I think I'm going to sell at 508. Is that allowed on the rules? Am I allowed to split that, live that hedge life?
I don't know how that exactly works, but
I like 508 just seems like as we sit right now just seems like a little early. But I'm seeing him finish ahead of 27. You know what I mean? That's kind of where I'm sitting with that. I think in a normal year where everyone's not so starved and crazed for running backs, like RB27, you're not going to have to take RB27 at 508. But if I'm going to commit, I'm going to commit to buying because I do think that Akers takes over this running back room sooner rather than later. I don't care about Sean McVay and what everyone's pointing to in that article with him saying like we're going to use the committee. You don't move up in the third round last year to take Henderson if you think he's going to be the guy, and then take Akers in the second round the following year. If they felt that comfortable with Henderson and Brown, they're not going to take that second round capital that team is not in a great spot with the defense, with the O-line. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to waste that second round capital on Akers if they felt comfortable with Henderson and Brown. So I do think he takes over that room sooner rather than later. I'm not seeing like a Christian McCaffrey level usage with him. I still think those other guys are going to be involved, but I do think Akers sees the lion's share of those touches. So I will buy here.
Yeah, I do understand what you're saying because saying like fifth round seems a little rich, but then you're like RB27 though, and I get that, but I think it would depend on roster construction for me because I do think there's a couple of running backs that maybe I'd have a little bit more interest in a little bit later than him, but at the same time, I do think he has that sort of upside that you're looking for. I do think the Rams offense is going to kind of bounce back from what it's going to be much more similar in my opinion to the 2018 Rams than the 2019 Rams in terms of their offense. So for that, like I definitely think Cam Akers is the best running back they have on that team. I definitely believe that. Mm-hmm. And I know there's a lot of narrative out there. People are pumping their narratives on Twitter, which are just ridiculous. And people try to back up their narratives with any little thing they can find. They're grabbing at straws as much as they possibly can. But I think Cam Akers is the best running back on this team. I think Darrell Henderson maybe is more of just that RB2. And I think Cam Akers, he has that upside, that league-winning potential, that RB1 upside there. And so I have no problem with him, with taking him at RB27. Mid-fifth is a little rich for me. I will say that. But in a situation where these running backs are flying off the board for everybody, like, right. You're going to have to kind of, you're going to have to make this decision. But like I said, Cam Akers at RB27 isn't ridiculous. It's the last running back that we have to talk about is Keyshawn Vaughn, right? He is currently going at RB31, 702, and then Ronald Jones is going RB36 and 801. There is quite the power struggle going on right now between the Ronald Jones, Keyshawn Vaughn debate, right? And it's really starting to get to a point where more and more people are jumping on the Ronald Jones bandwagon, and people are really hyping up Ronald Jones. Now, objectively, and trying to not let my bias come out with how much I love Keyshawn Vaughn, like Ronald Jones was better than what he last year, and certainly what he was his rookie year, right? But I still believe that Ronald Jones is just a guy, and I think there's a reason they went out and brought in Keyshawn Vaughn, and I think that he is certainly much more involved in the passing game. I do not think that he's not James White. I've seen that. He's not James White. Like that, he is not that good of a receiving back. He is certainly more than capable. Okay. But he's not that. And I've also seen the Keyshawn Vaughn is too small to be a lead back, but he's almost 220 pounds. Like that is ridiculous. Like whoever says that clearly is not paying attention to anything. For me, if things were as they currently are, I would really have no problem taking probably either one, because I think the upside's kind of baked into it, right? Because if you take him, in the 7th round, Keyshawn Vaughn at RB31, if he's your 4th or 5th running back, like I don't hate that, because I think he certainly is going to have opportunity. And I think he's going to have opportunity early. I think at the very least he starts out getting that pass catching work. And then with Ronald Jones, again, same thing. Like, right now, I am buying Keyshawn Vaughn and selling Ronald.
Yep, I'd agree. I don't think we really have to go too much further into this one. This is where anytime Ronald Jones comes up, I'm going to have the same response. He couldn't beat out Peyton Barber. That's all you need to know. And they let that dude walk.
So yeah,
that's it.